What do you do when the man who tucked you in at night becomes the one you have to run from? Grace was just 7, deaf, bright-eyed, and full of love for a father who once told her she was his whole world. But behind the polished smile of Victor Beaumont, a respected businessman, a rich man with influence and charm, lay a darkness no one dared imagine. And when Grace stumbled upon the secrets hidden behind locked doors and whispered phone calls, the mask began to slip. What kind of rich man burns down his own house with his daughter trapped inside? What kind of child runs barefoot into the storm, guided only by instinct and the loyalty of a dog who'd die to protect her? The story you're about to hear isn't just about survival. It's about betrayal, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bond between a girl and her Rottweiler, Cooper. I've written a lot of dark stories, but this one stayed with me. Now I want to hear from you. Did this story hit you like it hit me? Did something about Grace's courage or Victor's terrifying descent stir something in you? Maybe you've seen someone hide behind a perfect image. 2. Tell me in the comments. What part of this story struck you the hardest? Watch until the end. I have a small gift for you waiting there. Now, let's return to the beginning and see how it all unfolded. The Beaumont mansion loomed against the bruised twilight sky, its Gothic spires clawing at the turbulent, storm-laden clouds. Rain, driven by a furious wind, lashed against the leaded glass windows, each pane reflecting the opulent, yet profoundly gloomy, interior. This was a house of secrets, its lavish halls echoing with unspoken anxieties, its very foundations seemingly steeped in a history too dark to acknowledge. Inside, Victor Beaumont, a man whose bespoke suits usually radiated an aura of unshakable control, paced the length of his cavernous study like a caged animal. His normally immaculate silver-streaked hair was disheveled, his face drawn and pale beneath the flickering gaslight-style lamps. He wasn't alone. Lounging with an almost predatory grace in one of his antique Louis XV chairs was Isabelle Dubois. Her beauty was flawless, sculpted, as cold and sharp as a diamond. She was his business partner, his lover, and, in the intricate, dangerous game they played, undeniably his superior, Cooper, Grace's formidable Rottweiler, lay near the study door, a low, almost inaudible rumble vibrating in his massive chest. His amber eyes, usually soft when fixed on 7-year-old Grace, were narrowed, fixed unwaveringly on Isabelle. He'd been like this ever since Isabelle had become a more permanent fixture in their lives, a quiet, simmering hostility that Victor chose to ignore, but that Isabelle met with a chillingly amused smile. There were whispers, never substantiated, that Cooper had once belonged to Grace's mother, a woman whose memory was a carefully sanitized, almost erased, chapter in the Beaumont family history. Time is running out. Victor, Isabelle's voice, smooth as silk, sharp as a stiletto, cut through the oppressive silence. The girl, Grace? She turns 8 next month. You know what that means. She paused, letting the implication hang in the air. The trustees of her mother's original estate will be legally obligated to disclose certain assets that they believe no longer exist, or at least are untraceable. Her eyes, the color of winter ice, met his. She's an uncontrollable risk. Victor, a loose thread that could unravel everything we've built. Everything I've built. Victor stopped pacing, his hands clenching and unclenching. I understand. Isabelle, I'll handle it. His voice was weary, tinged with a resignation that spoke of a man long past the point of resistance. He was a pawn, albeit a powerful one, in a game orchestrated by forces far greater and more ruthless than himself. Isabelle, and the shadowy figures she represented, were closing in. Isabelle, and those behind her. Victor's internal monologue was a frantic whisper. They won't stop, not until they have it all. And Grace, my own daughter. She's somehow the key, the obstacle. He thought of the Beaumont fortune, a colossal empire built over generations, its origins shrouded in whispers of ruthless acquisitions and betrayed trusts, a history his own father had taken to his grave. Isabel, he suspected, knew more about those origins than she let on. Her own family, the Dubois, had once been rivals, then mysteriously faded into obscurity. Revenge, he often thought, might be as potent a motivator for her as greed. Later, as the storm raged outside, its fury a mirror to the turmoil within the mansion's walls, Grace played a solitary game of hide-and-seek with Cooper. Her laughter, usually a bright, tinkling sound, was subdued, her small face etched with an unconscious anxiety she couldn't name. She knew her father was stressed, that Miss Isabel's visits, while often accompanied by expensive, unwanted gifts for Grace, left a chill in the air that even Cooper's warm presence couldn't quite dispel. Seeking a new hiding spot, Grace, a wisp of a girl with wide, observant eyes that missed nothing, found herself drawn to her father's rarely used secondary study, a room Isabel had recently taken to using for her private calls. The door was slightly ajar. Curiosity, a child's innocent prerogative, pulled her in. The room was dark, smelling faintly of Isabel's expensive, cloying perfume and old leather. Her eyes fell upon a large, antique desk. Strewn across its polished surface were several documents, one of which was an old, sepia-toned photograph. It depicted a group of stern-faced men and one woman standing before a grand, unfamiliar building. There was something about the woman's face. Grace picked it up, her mind gifted with an astonishing eidetic memory. Our photographic recall, that often startled adults, began to absorb the details: the woman's unusual locket, the crest on the building's stone archway, the faded script on a signpost in the background. She didn't understand what she was looking at, but the image imprinted itself with perfect clarity. "And what do we have here, little mouse?" Grace jumped, whirling around, the photograph still clutched in her hand. Isabelle Dubois stood in the doorway, her smile a terrifyingly beautiful rictus. Behind her, Victor's face was a mask of pure panic. I was just looking, Miss Isabel," Grace stammered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "This picture, the lady, she looks a bit like the painting in the long gallery, the one with the sad eyes. A painting of her own mother, Elodie Beaumont, who had died under circumstances Victor always described as a tragic accident. When Grace was too young to remember, Isabel's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, darted from Grace to the photograph, then to Victor, a silent, venomous communication passing between them. She glided into the room, gently taking the photograph from Grace's trembling fingers. "Just an old picture of some distant relatives. Sweetie," Isabel purred, her voice a silken trap. "Nothing for you to worry your pretty little head about." She ruffled Grace's hair, her touch feeling like ice. "Now, run along and play. Your father and I have some boring adult things to discuss." As soon as Grace had fled, Isabel's demeanor shifted. The silken purr became a vicious hiss. She saw it. Victor. She saw the photograph of the original shareholders of the Argentas mine. And with that freakish memory of hers, she knows. The girl is no longer a potential risk. She's a ticking time bomb. We can't delay any longer. We act tonight. Marcus will take care of it. Victor's face was ashen. Tonight. But the storm. Isabel. She's just a child. A flicker of something. Paternal instinct. A shred of conscience. Tried to surface, but Isabel's icy gaze extinguished it. A child who can bring everything crashing down around our ears. Victor, Your sentimentality is a liability we can no longer afford. Or perhaps you'd prefer to explain things to them? The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air. Victor nodded. Defeated. The order was given to Marcus Thorne, Victor's all-purpose fixer, a man whose loyalty was as malleable as the stacks of cash Victor used to secure it. Tonight, Victor instructed, his voice hollow, avoiding Marcus's gaze. The West Woods, by the old, abandoned Blackwood Sanatorium. It has to be done before dawn. Make it look like an accident, a tragic consequence of her wandering off. And the dog. Victor hesitated, a pang of something he couldn't identify twisting in his gut. Cooper had been Elodie's dog first. Take care of the dog, too. It can't be a witness. Grace, bundled into a warm coat by a strangely agitated housekeeper, felt a primal fear grip her. Cooper, she whispered, burying her face in the dog's thick, reassuring fur as Marcus approached, a leash and a muzzle in his hand. I'm scared. Cooper, Daddy and Miss Isabel. They looked at me. So strangely, Cooper, sensing the imminent, mortal danger to his beloved charge, became a furry embodiment of fury. He growled, a deep, menacing sound that vibrated through the floorboards, planting himself firmly in front of Grace. When Marcus reached for her, Cooper lunged, not with the intent to seriously injure, but to drive him back, snapping at the man's outstretched hand, his barks echoing through the grand. Cold foyer, damn dog. Marcus cursed, snatching his hand back. Victor, his face a mask of tormented resolve, grabbed Cooper's collar. Get him out of here. He yelled at two other household staff who had appeared, drawn by the commotion. Despite Cooper's desperate struggles, he was dragged away, a heavy oak door slamming shut behind him. His frantic barks muffled but not silenced. Marcus, his hand smarting, roughly pulled Grace towards the front door. Your Nana Eleanor is feeling a bit under the weather. Kid, he lied, his voice unconvincing. Your dad wants you to go stay with her for a few days. Give her some company. Grace knew, with a chilling certainty, that he was lying. Nana Eleanor lived hours away, and there had been no mention of any visit. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her, in the makeshift kennel where he'd been confined, an old, sturdy wine cellar. Cooper was a whirlwind of intelligent desperation. He clawed at the door, bit at the iron hinges, his powerful body a coiled spring of intent. He remembered this scent of fear from long ago, a scent associated with Grace's mother, with shouting, with a final, terrible silence. He had to get to Grace. He threw himself against the door again and again, the old wood groaning, splintering, with a final, explosive surge of strength. The lock gave way. Marcus's car sped through the stormy night, the wipers struggling to clear the torrential rain from the windshield. Grace sat in the back, small and silent, her mind racing, replaying the image from the photograph, her father's ashen face, Isabel's cruel smile. They reached the edge of the West Woods, a dark, forbidding expanse of ancient trees that bordered the crumbling, ivy-choked ruins of the Blackwood Sanatorium, a place whispered to be haunted, a place intrinsically linked to the more unsavory chapters of Beaumont family lore. Out of the car. Kid, Marcus grunted, cutting the engine. He opened her door, the wind snatching his words away. This is where you get off? Your dad said to make sure you had a little adventure. His attempt at a smirk was grotesque in the intermittent flashes of lightning. He reached for her, his intentions chillingly clear. Grace screamed, a raw, terrified sound swallowed by the storm. No, let me go. Cooper, help me. Cooper, as if summoned by her desperate cry, a black shape, moving with incredible speed and ferocity, erupted from the storm-lashed trees. It was Cooper. He slammed into Marcus with the force of a cannonball. knocking the larger man off his feet. A savage symphony of growls, snarls, and Marcus's pained yells filled the air. Cooper, a protective demon, bit and tore at Marcus's arm, his leg, anywhere he could get a hold, giving Marcus no quarter. Run, Grace, run. The words were a desperate, primal bark that Grace understood with perfect clarity. She scrambled out of the car, her small legs pumping, and fled blindly into the inky, terrifying depths of the forest. The sound of the struggle, the thunder, and her own ragged sobs a chaotic cacophony in her ears. Behind her, Cooper, having momentarily disabled Marcus, disengaged. He took a deep gash to his flank from a pocket knife Marcus had managed to draw, but ignored the searing pain. His only thought was Grace. He barked once more in the direction she had fled. Then, with a final, contemptuous snarl at the groaning, bleeding henchman, he plunged into the woods after his girl, a loyal, wounded guardian disappearing into the raging heart of the storm. The escape had begun. The storm raged for what felt like an eternity, mirroring the tempest in Grace's small, terrified heart. She stumbled through the pitch-black, rain-lashed west woods, jagged flashes of lightning illuminating grotesque, grasping branches and the spectral ruins of the Blackwood Sanatorium in the distance. Cooper, a dark, silent shadow, stayed preternaturally close, nudging her forward, his warm breath a comfort against her cold hand, despite the blood matting the fur on his flank from Marcus's knife. Exhaustion gnawed at Grace, her small body fueled only by adrenaline and the primal need to escape. Finally, as the storm began to subside with the gray, weeping dawn, Cooper guided her into a shallow, moss-lined cave hidden behind a curtain of tangled ivy near a gurgling, swollen stream. There, huddled against his massive, wounded body for warmth, Grace finally succumbed to a fitful, feverish sleep. It was Sarah Evans who found them later that morning, a woman whose face was a map of gentle kindness, etched by sun and wind. Sarah often ventured into the woods bordering their small, self-sufficient farm to forage for medicinal herbs and mushrooms. She was drawn by a faint, distressed whimpering. Cooper, his strength waning, trying to rouse a near-delirious Grace. "Easy now, brave fellow," Sarah said softly, her voice a calm melody as she spotted them, keeping a safe distance. Cooper, his fur caked with mud and dried blood, staggered to his feet, a low growl rumbling in his chest as he shielded Grace, but his stance was wobbly. His eyes, though fiercely protective, were clouded with pain and exhaustion. He was clearly at his limit. The little one needs help, and so do you. Poor thing. We mean no harm, I promise, Grace moaned. A small, broken sound. "Mama," she whispered, her eyes fluttering beneath swollen lids. "The music box. He took Mama's music box." The words were disjointed, fever-fueled, but they tugged at Sarah's heart. Cooper, hearing Grace's distress, looked from the child to Sarah, a desperate, intelligent plea in his gaze. He whined again, a softer sound this time, and took a hesitant step back, his body swaying. "That's it. Good boy," Sarah murmured, her heart aching. She slowly approached, her movements calm and unthreatening. The child was burning with fever, her clothes torn, her small face scratched and bruised. The dog was clearly injured. "David," she called, her voice carrying through the trees. "David, bring the old cart and the first aid kit. Hurry!" David Evans, a man whose quiet strength was as solid as the ancient oaks on their land, arrived minutes later. His weathered face registered shock, then a deep, sorrowful anger. Poor little mite. And this magnificent dog. Look at that gash on his side. Who in God's name could do this? Leave a child and her protector out here to die. Together, they gently lifted Grace, wrapped her in David's flannel shirt, and carefully helped a limping Cooper into the sturdy wooden cart. The Evanses' farmhouse, though modest, radiated a warmth and tranquility that felt a world away from the oppressive grandeur of the Beaumont mansion. Sarah, with practiced hands, cleaned and tended to Grace's cuts and bruises, coaxing sips of warm broth and fever. Reducing willow bark tea past her dry lips. David, meanwhile, carefully cleaned and stitched Cooper's deep wound, the dog enduring the painful procedure with a stoic trust that touched the farmer deeply. For days, Grace hovered in a state of semi-consciousness, her sleep troubled by nightmares that made her cry out. Cooper, his own recovery slow but steady, refused to leave her side, his massive head resting on the edge of her small cot, his presence a constant, reassuring weight. When Grace finally awoke, truly awake, her wide, intelligent eyes were filled with a profound, deep-seated fear. She was quiet, unnervingly so, communicating mostly through nods, shakes of her head, and the expressive language of her eyes. Sarah and David soon realized the depth of her trauma wasn't her only unique trait. Grace possessed an astonishing eidetic memory. Once she was strong enough to hold a crayon, she would spend hours drawing on scraps of paper David provided. Her drawings were not the usual childish scribbles. They were intricate, disturbingly detailed, the chillingly accurate facade of the Beaumont mansion, the menacing sneer on Marcus's face, the cold, beautiful features of Isabelle Dubois. And then there were the recurring, cryptic images, a strange, almost runic symbol, and the photograph she had seen in Isabelle's temporary study, the one with the stern-faced people and the woman who resembled her mother. She would draw the woman's unique locket with obsessive precision. "Look at this, David," Sarah said one evening, holding up a drawing of the locket. "She keeps drawing this over and over. And that symbol, what could it all mean?" She then pointed to another drawing, a detailed rendering of the Beaumont crest, which Grace had apparently memorized from somewhere in the mansion. She remembers everything she sees, down to the smallest detail. It's extraordinary, and perhaps very dangerous for her. Cooper, too, exhibited peculiar behaviors. He'd whine softly whenever Grace drew the image of Isabel, his hackles rising slightly. One afternoon, while exploring the Evanses' cluttered attic with Grace trailing behind him, Cooper began to nudge insistently at an old, dust-covered wooden chest tucked away in a dark corner. He sniffed at it, pawed at it, and looked back at David with an almost desperate urgency, as if trying to communicate something vital. The chest, David recalled, had come with the property when they bought it years ago. It had belonged to the previous owners, who had connections to the long-abandoned Blackwood Sanatorium and, some whispered, to the early Beaumont family. Meanwhile, the world outside their quiet haven was anything but peaceful. Victor Beaumont and Isabelle Dubois, their faces masks of carefully orchestrated grief, launched a high-profile media campaign. "Our beloved daughter, Grace Beaumont," Victor's voice choked with emotion on the nightly news, lost during an unfortunate family outing in the remote Northridge woods. "She is a shy, gentle child," Isabel, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, added, "Grace is easily frightened. We are desperate, terrified of what horrors she might be facing alone. We are offering a substantial reward for any information leading to her safe return." They provided a photograph of Grace, a carefully chosen one where she looked younger, more cherubic, and subtly different from the traumatized child the Evanses were sheltering. The news reached Harmony Creek, the small town nestled in the valley below the Evans farm. Mrs. Agnes Periwinkle, the sharp-witted, kind-hearted owner of the town's bustling general store and de facto community hub, watched the broadcast with a skeptical frown. She'd heard from David Evans about the lost angel. They'd found a child who'd clearly been through hell, A few days later, Mr. Elias Vance, the reclusive former groundskeeper of the Blackwood Sanatorium estate, a property that had, generations ago, been part of the original Beaumont holdings, made a rare trip into town for supplies. He was a man of indeterminate age, his face a road map of wrinkles, his eyes possessing a startling, assessing clarity. As he waited for Mrs. Agnes to tally his meager purchases, his gaze fell upon a newspaper carrying the Beaumont's plea. He froze, his eyes locking onto Grace's picture, then narrowing as he read the accompanying article. Later that week, while David and Sarah were cautiously searching the edges of the West Woods, hoping to find any clues, any discarded item that might help them understand who Grace was, they encountered Elias Vance. He was standing near the crumbling stone wall that marked the boundary of the old sanatorium grounds, his gaze fixed on the distant, imposing silhouette of the Beaumont mansion on its hill. Cooper, who was with them, suddenly stiffened, a low growl rumbling in his chest before he let out a short, inquisitive bark, his tail giving a tentative wag. Elias Vance turned, his keen eyes falling first on Cooper, then on Grace, who clung to Sarah's hand, a flicker of something unreadable. Recognition, sorrow, judged across his weathered face. "That dog," Elias said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "He has the look of Elodie's old companion. And the child," he squinted at Grace, "there's a shadow of her mother in her eyes." He paused, then added, almost to himself, "Blackwood holds many secrets. Some are best left buried. Others have a way of clawing themselves back into the light." He then pointed towards a barely visible, overgrown path. "That path leads to the old spring house on the Blackwood grounds. Sometimes things lost find their way there." With a curt nod, he turned and disappeared back into the trees, leaving David and Sarah more bewildered and concerned than ever. Back in Harmony Creek, Mrs. Agnes was piecing things together. "That Isabelle Dubois," she declared to Sarah during her next visit to the store. "Her eyes are like ice chips. No real grief there. I tell you, all performance." And Victor Beaumont, his first wife, Elodie, Grace's mother, died mighty mysteriously. Didn't she? Some folks said she knew too much about the Beaumont family's less savory business dealings. That Blackwood Sanatorium land, for instance. Heard old man Beaumont got it for a song after some unfortunate incidents befell the previous owners. She leaned closer, and now this little girl, found near Blackwood, not Northridge like they claim on TV. It all smells fishier than last week's catch. Sarah, that evening, David, Sarah, and a newly resolved Elias Vance, who had sought them out again after their encounter, sat around the Evanses' kitchen table. Grace's disturbing drawings were spread out before them. "It's not just a child lost in the woods, is it?" David said, his voice heavy. "This is something far bigger, far more dangerous. And Grace, bless her heart, is right in the middle of it. That photograph she keeps drawing, the locket, the symbol, these are pieces of a puzzle." Elias Vance, his usual reticence gone, nodded grimly. "The Beaumont legacy is built on more than just shrewd investments. David, there are dark chapters, secrets that could destroy them if revealed. Elodie, Grace's mother, I believe she stumbled upon one of them, and I believe that's why she died." He looked at Grace's drawing of the locket. That locket, it was Elodie's. It was said to hold a key. Not a physical key, but something, a clue. Sarah's face was pale but determined. "We can't do this alone. Grace needs more help than we can give her. We need someone who understands trauma, someone who can help her unlock what she knows without breaking her, and someone who isn't afraid to stand up to people like Victor Beaumont and Isabelle Dubois Elias Vance slowly nodded. There is a woman, a psychologist, Evelyn Reed. She helped a family I knew once. A complicated case involving powerful people. She is discreet, intelligent, and very, very tenacious. A fragile plan began to form, a desperate gamble to protect a child and uncover a truth that had remained buried for far too long. The haven they had found was no longer enough. They needed to fight back. The decision to seek professional help solidified the quiet resolve that had taken root in the Evanses' farmhouse. Elias Vance, his eyes holding a depth of knowledge that belied his humble appearance as a former groundskeeper, knew of such a person, Evelyn Reed. He'd said, his voice a low rumble, she has a gift for listening to silence, for understanding the language of trauma, and she's not easily intimidated. Elodie, Grace's mother, spoke of her once, admired her work from afar, and so, a few days later, Sarah Evans and Elias Vance, with a subdued Grace and an ever-watchful Cooper, found themselves in Evelyn Reed's city office. It was a sanctuary of calm. Soft lighting, comfortable, mismatched armchairs, and walls adorned not with sterile diplomas, but with vibrant, expressive art. Much of it, clearly, the work of children. Evelyn herself possessed an aura of quiet competence and profound empathy. She greeted Grace not with probing questions, but with a warm, genuine smile and an invitation to explore the basket of art supplies in the corner. Cooper, after a thorough olfactory investigation of the room, and Evelyn herself, settled at Grace's feet with a contented sigh, a silent endorsement. Grace isn't just a lost child. Ms. Reed, Elias stated, his gaze direct, after Grace had become absorbed in drawing. Cooper's head a reassuring presence on her lap. She is, we believe, an unwitting key to a very large, very dangerous truth connected to the Beaumont family and their associates. We hope you can help her unlock what she remembers. Safely. Evelyn listened intently as Elias and Sarah recounted what they knew, what they suspected, and the chilling details of Grace's drawings, particularly the recurring image of a locket and a music box Grace had mentioned in her fevered state. Her sessions with Grace were a masterclass in patience and gentle probing. She never pushed, never demanded. Instead, she used art therapy, allowing Grace to draw her memories, her fears. She used storytelling, creating narratives around the images Grace produced. Cooper was always present, a furry, warm anchor for Grace when the shadows of memory threatened to overwhelm her. Grace, dear, Evelyn said softly during one session, pointing to a detailed drawing of a woman with kind eyes holding an ornate box. A recurring motif. This is so beautifully drawn. You mentioned your mama used to sing to you from a box like this. Her music box. Can you tell me more about it? What did it look like? Where did she keep it? Grace, her small face scrunched in concentration, picked up a charcoal stick. She drew the box, its intricate carvings, a tiny, almost invisible clasp. Then, her hand trembled. Mama sang soft, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Before Scary Man, Daddy, and Red Hair Lady, Isabel, came. Mama said, hide, Gracie, keep box safe. Always, tears welled in her eyes, and she buried her face in Cooper's fur. Evelyn gently reassured her, her heart aching for the child's pain, but also recognizing the vital importance of these fractured recollections. Elias Vance listened to Evelyn's summaries of these sessions with a growing sense of urgency. The music box, he murmured, his brow furrowed in thought. Elodie loved music. She also had a small, private art studio in one of the old outbuildings of the Blackwood Sanatorium estate. It was her sanctuary, a place Victor rarely visited. If she wanted to hide something truly important, the decision was made. Under the cloak of a moonless night, David Evans, Elias, and a reluctant but resolute Sarah Evelyn stayed behind with Grace. Deeming the trip too risky for the child, ventured towards the derelict Blackwood Sanatorium. Cooper, his senses on high alert, accompanied them, his presence both a comfort and a warning. The sanatorium, a Gothic, decaying monolith, loomed against the dark sky, its broken windows like empty eye sockets. Elias, moving with a surprising agility for his age. A hint, perhaps, of a more active past than that of a simple groundskeeper, led them through the overgrown grounds to a secluded stone cottage, Elodie Beaumont's forgotten studio. The air inside was thick with the scent of dust, decay, and faint, lingering traces of turpentine and dried flowers. Cobwebs draped the furniture like ghostly shrouds. Cooper, however, seemed to know exactly where he was going. He bypassed the main room, heading straight for a small alcove hidden behind a faded tapestry. He began to sniff and paw at a loose floorboard, whining softly. David, using a crowbar Elias had brought, carefully pried it open. Beneath it, nestled in a bed of dried lavender, was a small, rosewood box, intricately carved, just as Grace had drawn, and beside it, a leather-bound journal. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the box. It wasn't a music box in the traditional sense. Instead, it contained a collection of seemingly innocuous items, a few old, foreign coins, a pressed wildflower, a tiny, intricately folded piece of parchment with a strange symbol, the same symbol Grace kept drawing, and a small, tarnished silver locket, identical to the one in Grace's pictures. The journal was filled with Elodie Beaumont's elegant, looping script. Much of it was mundane, observations about her art, her garden. But then, interspersed, were coded entries, sketches of financial transactions with cryptic annotations, and increasingly fearful observations about Victor's new associates, particularly a cunning, ruthless woman with eyes of winter, undoubtedly Isabelle Dubois. There were also sketches of the photograph Grace had seen, with names and dates jotted beside the figures. "My God," David breathed. Scanning a page, Elias pointed out, which seemed to detail a systematic siphoning of funds through shell corporations linked to the Argentus mine, the very enterprise Grace's photograph had depicted. "This isn't just shady business dealings. Elias, this is a massive criminal enterprise, and Isabelle Dubois and Victor Beaumont are right in the thick of it." Evelyn, when they presented their findings to her the next morning, meticulously analyzed the journal and the contents of the box. Elodie was gathering evidence, she concluded, her voice grave. She knew she was in danger. "This symbol," she pointed to the parchment. "It appears in several of her coded entries, usually alongside names or sums of money. It might be a ledger mark, or a symbol of the organization Victor and Isabel are involved with." Her gaze softened as she looked at Grace, who was quietly drawing Cooper, and Grace, with her perfect memory, became the living repository of a crucial piece of this puzzle when she saw that photograph. Elodie must have known her daughter's unique ability. Perhaps this box, these clues, were meant for Grace to find, or for someone who could help Grace. When the time was right, their quiet investigation, however, had not gone unnoticed. Marcus Thorne, battered, bruised, and terrified after his encounter with Cooper, was also a desperate man. Victor and Isabel had paid him off, but with a clear, unspoken threat: disappear and stay silent, or face permanent consequences. But Marcus was a survivor. He figured someone else might pay more for what he now knew, or at least offer him a lifeline. He made a clandestine call to a number he'd found for Elias Vance. A long shot, but Elias was an old fixture at the Beaumont estate, someone who might know things, someone who might have his own reasons to dislike Victor. "Mr. Vance," Marcus's voice was a nervous rasp. "It's Marcus Thorne. Yeah, that Marcus. Listen, I know things. Things Beaumont and that Dubois witch wouldn't want anyone to know. About the girl. Grace. About their plans. They're not just looking for her like they say on TV. They've hired professionals. Real hunters. They're closing in. I can give you details. For a price. And protection. Elias arranged a tense, furtive meeting in a dimly lit back alley of Harmony Creek. Marcus, his eyes darting nervously, spilled his guts. He confirmed Victor and Isabel were using private investigators, ex-military types. To track Grace, he revealed they were trying to discredit anyone who might help her, even attempting to bribe local law enforcement. They know she's not just a lost kid, Marcus said, sweat beading on his forehead. They know she saw something. That Dubois woman. She's obsessed with finding her, and she wants that locket Grace's mother always wore, the one the kid might have. He didn't know why the locket was important, only that Isabel had been furious when she realized Grace hadn't had it when Marcus grabbed her. Evelyn listened to Elias's report of the meeting with grim satisfaction. Marcus is a viper, Elias, but even vipers can be useful. His information, if true, means we're running out of time. They're actively hunting us. Her words proved prophetic. The following days were filled with a new, palpable sense of dread. Strange cars were seen cruising slowly past the Evans farm. Sarah received a series of silent, heavy-breathing phone calls. One morning, David found the tires of his truck slashed. Cooper, always vigilant, would often stand at the edge of the woods, barking furiously at unseen watchers, his protective instincts on overdrive. Grace's nightmares returned with a vengeance, her small cries often waking the household. "We're not safe here anymore," Sarah said one evening, her voice trembling as she clutched David's hand. "They know we have her, or they strongly suspect." Isabel's voice, in a secure call to Victor, was laced with icy fury. The old groundskeeper, Vance, he's involved. And that meddling psychologist. They're getting too close. Find the girl. Victor. Find her and the locket Elodie was so fond of. This time, there will be no mistakes. Eliminate any and all obstacles. Elias Vance, his face grim, knew they had to move. The evidence from Elodie's journal is damning. But it's not enough to bring them down without risking Grace. We need more, something to connect this symbol, these names, directly to Isabel's current operations. He looked at the small, tarnished locket they'd found, which Grace now wore, refusing to take it off, saying it made her feel close to her mother. And this locket. Elodie always said it was more than just jewelry. She said it held memories. He paused. "I know a place, a remote cabin, deep in the mountains. It belonged to Elodie's maternal grandmother. It's difficult to reach, well hidden. We can lay low there, try to decipher more of Elodie's clues, and plan our next move. But getting there, it will be dangerous. They will be watching our every step." The die was cast. The fragile haven was no longer safe. The hunt had intensified, and Grace's protectors knew they were now not just deciphering the past, but fighting for their very survival, and for Grace's future. What did you think of today's story? If it made your day, drop a good in the comments. If it didn't hit the mark, just type 1. Got your own thoughts? I'd love to hear them below. And hey, don't forget to hit subscribe. It's free, and it really helps the channel grow. Thank you so much for being here. The weight of Elodie Beaumont's journal and the contents of the rosewood box settled heavily on the small group huddled in the Evanses' farmhouse. Elias Vance's suggestion of retreating to a remote mountain cabin, one that had belonged to Elodie's maternal grandmother, felt like their only viable option. The menacing surveillance, the slashed tires, the silent phone calls. Victor and Isabel were closing in. their invisible net tightening. The journey to the cabin was a masterpiece of evasion, orchestrated by Elias, whose knowledge of the backcountry and skills in misdirection hinted at a past far removed from tending roses. They traveled by night, using winding, forgotten logging roads, David Evans's sturdy old truck groaning under the strain. Grace, nestled between Sarah and Cooper in the back, clutched Elodie's locket, its cool metal a tangible link to a mother she barely remembered, but whose courage she was beginning to understand. During this tense period, Eleanor Beaumont was undergoing her own private torment. The evidence Evelyn Reed had discreetly couriered to her. Copies of Elodie's journal entries, photographs of Grace's drawings, Marcus Thorne's chilling deposition, was irrefutable. Alone in her palatial city mansion, surrounded by portraits of Beaumont ancestors and the silent, accusing ghosts of her own complicity, Eleanor finally confronted the monstrous truth. She pored over Elodie's delicate script, recognizing the coded references to Victor's increasingly reckless ventures, his thraldom to Isabelle Dubois, and Elodie's growing terror. She saw pictures of Grace, taken by Sarah, her eyes wide with a fear no child should ever know. Then, she looked at a photograph of a younger Victor, an innocent boy with a bright smile, and the tears she had held back for years finally fell. What have I allowed to happen? The question was a raw, gaping wound in her soul. In my desire to protect the family name, the Beaumont legacy, have I nurtured a monster Elodie? My dear Elodie. She tried to warn me, in her own subtle ways, and I dismissed her fears as melodrama. And Grace, my granddaughter. A new, fierce resolve hardened her expression. The time for willful blindness was over. Her call to Evelyn Reed was abrupt, her voice stripped of its usual aristocratic hauteur, now raw with pain and a steely determination. Ms. Reed, it's Eleanor Beaumont. I know everything. Victor and that creature Isabelle. They are an abomination. They've destroyed lives, corrupted everything they've touched. Tell me what I must do. I will help you bring them to justice. For Grace, and for Elodie, Eleanor, it turned out, possessed the final, devastating pieces of the puzzle. She knew of Victor's secret ledgers, not just the ones detailing his legitimate businesses, but the shadow accounts, the coded transactions that funneled vast sums of money from illicit sources, the Argentus mine being just one of them, into Isabelle Dubois' labyrinthine network of offshore corporations. More damningly, she had, years ago, after Elodie's accidental death, found a small, encrypted audio recorder hidden amongst Elodie's personal effects. Elodie, suspecting her life was in danger, had recorded a final, terrified message detailing Victor's threats, Isabelle's sinister influence, and her fears for Grace's safety if anything happened to her. She'd also mentioned a hidden compartment in the very locket Grace now wore, a compartment Elodie believed contained a microfilm with irrefutable proof of the initial fraud that had built the Beaumont fortune, the dispossession of the original Argentus mine stakeholders, including, ironically, Isabelle Dubois' own ancestors, a fact Isabelle had twisted into a perverse justification for her own far-reaching criminal empire and her systematic destruction of the Beaumonts from within. Isabelle isn't just a greedy associate. Miss Reed, Eleanor revealed, her voice trembling with the enormity of it all. She's on a decades-long vendetta, using Victor, destroying him, to reclaim what she believes was stolen from her family, and to build her own criminal syndicate on the ruins. Elodie discovered the truth about Isabelle's origins and her ultimate plan. That's why she was silenced, armed with this new, explosive information, and with Eleanor Beaumont now a powerful, albeit heartbroken, ally. Evelyn Reed formulated a daring plan. They would lure Victor and Isabelle to a place where they felt secure, a place steeped in Beaumont history, a place where Elodie's ghost might finally find peace. The abandoned Blackwood Sanatorium. Specifically, Elodie's old stone studio cottage, the locket, and the microfilm it supposedly contained would be the bait. Evelyn also made a discreet call to a trusted contact within the state's Special Investigative Unit, a unit known for tackling complex organized crime. The message, delivered through a carefully compromised channel Marcus Thorne had once used, was simple. Grace Beaumont has remembered where her mother hid the original Argentus mine ledgers. She also has her mother's locket. She is at Elodie's old studio at Blackwood. Come alone if you want them. The trap was set. Elias, David, and a small team of plainclothes officers from the special unit, handpicked by Evelyn's contact, took up concealed positions around the cottage. Evelyn, Sarah, Grace, and Cooper waited inside. Grace, pale but resolute, wore the locket. She clutched Cooper's fur, her small hand trembling, but her eyes held a new, steely determination. She was no longer just a frightened child. She was Elodie's daughter. As dusk bled into a stormy, oppressive night, two sets of headlights sliced through the darkness. Victor and Isabel arrived, not alone, but with two burly, grim-faced men. Isabel's personal enforcers. Predictable, Evelyn murmured, watching them from a darkened window. Isabel strode into the cottage first, her eyes, like chips of obsidian, scanning the room, landing on Grace. Well, the little mouse decided to come out of her hole, and wearing Mommy's trinket, no less. How sentimental. Her voice was a silken sneer. Victor followed, his face a mask of anxiety and greed. Where are the ledgers? Grace Victor demanded, his voice harsh. Your mother. She hid things. They're safe, Grace said, her voice small but surprisingly steady. Evelyn had coached her, just like Mama wanted. Enough of this charade, Isabel snapped. She gestured to her men. Get the locket. And the girl, if she makes a sound, silence her permanently. We have what we came for. The confirmation she's alive and a loose end. As the men lunged, Cooper, with a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the old cottage, launched himself at the nearest assailant, his powerful jaws closing on an outstretched arm. The second man drew a gun, but before he could aim, a figure burst from the shadows near the doorway. Marcus Thorne. In his hand was a heavy iron skillet from the Evanses' kitchen, which he brought down with surprising force on the gunman's wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. You picked the wrong side. You bastards! Marcus yelled, his face a mixture of terror and exhilaration, before scrambling back out into the darkness. Isabel, momentarily stunned, recovered instantly, her beautiful face contorting into a mask of pure fury. Useless fools, she shrieked, pulling a small, deadly derringer from her evening bag. She aimed it at Grace. I'll deal with you myself, you little brat. But before she could fire, Eleanor Beaumont stepped out from an adjoining room, where she had been waiting with Sarah and David. In her hand was Elodie's audio recorder. Not this time. Isabel. Eleanor's voice was cold, clear, and filled with an icy authority that even Isabel hadn't anticipated. She pressed play. Elodie Beaumont's voice, terrified but clear, filled the small cottage, narrating Isabel's treachery, Victor's complicity, her fears for Grace. Isabel plans to destroy everything. Victor is too weak, too compromised. If anything happens to me, the locket. The locket holds the original truth. Protect Grace. Isabel's face went white. Victor stared at his mother, then at the recorder, then at Grace, his expression a kaleidoscope of horror, disbelief, and dawning, utter despair. Elodie, he whispered, the name a broken sound. It's over. Victor, it's over. Isabel, Eleanor said, her voice trembling but firm. As if on cue, the cottage doors burst open and the Special Investigative Unit, led by Detective Harding, stormed in. Victor Beaumont, Isabelle Dubois, you are under arrest for conspiracy, murder, kidnapping, and a host of financial crimes, Harding announced, her voice ringing with authority. Isabelle, cornered and enraged, raised her derringer, not at the police, but at Grace. If I'm going down, I'm taking her with me. In that split second, Cooper, already bleeding from a deep gash where the first henchman had flailed at him with a knife, threw himself in front of Grace again. The derringer fired. Cooper yelped, a terrible, high-pitched sound of agony as the bullet slammed into his shoulder. He collapsed, his body shielding Grace, a low whimper escaping his lips. Grace screamed, a sound of pure, unadulterated anguish. David Evans and one of the officers tackled Isabelle, disarming her as she fought like a wildcat, her beautiful face contorted in a snarl of defeat. Victor, all fight gone, sank to his knees, a broken man, sobbing uncontrollably. The chaos subsided into the grim efficiency of arrests. Victor and Isabelle, along with their injured henchmen, were cuffed and led away. Eleanor stood ramrod straight, watching her son's final ignominy, tears streaming down her face, but her expression resolute. Grace, frantic, was by Cooper's side, Sarah and Evelyn trying to staunch the bleeding. Cooper, oh, Cooper, please, she cried, her small hands stroking his massive head. He licked her hand weakly, his amber eyes filled with pain, but also an unwavering love. As the flashing blue and red lights receded into the stormy night, carrying away the architects of so much pain, Grace knelt beside her fallen hero, her tears mingling with the rain that had begun to fall again. Justice had been served. The dark secrets of the Beaumont legacy dragged into the light, but the victory was bittersweet, stained with the blood of the bravest heart she had ever known. The battle was over, but the fight for healing, for Cooper's life, had just begun. The aftermath of that terrible night at Elodie's studio was a blur of sirens, flashing lights, and the frantic, skilled movements of the emergency veterinary team. Grace, wrapped in Sarah Evans's trembling embrace, refused to leave Cooper's side, his labored breathing, the dark stain spreading on the makeshift bandages, tore at her with a pain sharper than any she had endured herself. The bullet, Isabelle's final act of venom, had missed his heart by a fraction of an inch, but the damage was severe. For days, he lay in a specialized veterinary clinic, a silent, stoic warrior fighting for his life, with Grace, Eleanor, and the Evanses maintaining a constant, prayerful vigil, slowly, miraculously, with the same indomitable spirit he'd shown in the face of every danger. Cooper began to mend. The road to recovery would be long, leaving him with a pronounced limp in his powerful left shoulder and a web of silver scars hidden beneath his dark fur. But he would walk beside Grace again. The wheels of justice, once set in motion by Eleanor's courage and Evelyn Reed's meticulous preparation, ground inexorably forward. The trial of Victor Beaumont and Isabelle Dubois became a media sensation, a lurid expose of greed, betrayal, and the dark underbelly of a respected dynasty. The courtroom was a theater of high drama. Elodie Beaumont's voice, captured on the small audio recorder her mother-in-law had presented, echoed through the silent chamber, a ghostly, damning testament from beyond the grave. Her terrified whispers about Isabelle's insidious plans and Victor's weak complicity sending shivers down the spines of even the most jaded reporters. The contents of the locket, the microfilm detailing the original Argentus mine fraud, the very genesis of Isabelle's twisted vendetta and Victor's inherited, corrupted wealth, were meticulously laid out. Grace's drawings, so hauntingly accurate, were presented as evidence of her trauma and her extraordinary memory. though Evelyn Reed ensured Grace herself was spared the ordeal of testifying directly. Her videotaped therapy sessions, handled with utmost sensitivity, conveyed the truth of her experience more powerfully than any cross-examination could. Eleanor Beaumont, a figure of tragic dignity, took the stand. Her voice, though laced with a mother's profound sorrow, was unwavering as she detailed Victor's descent, Isabel's manipulative control, and her own agonizing, belated awakening to the truth. She spoke of Elodie's fears, her attempts to gather proof, and her ultimate, tragic end, which Eleanor now firmly believed was no accident, but a carefully orchestrated murder. Victor Beaumont, throughout the proceedings, seemed a broken man, his arrogance shattered, replaced by a hollow-eyed despair. He offered little defense, his guilt a palpable shroud. Isabelle Dubois, however, remained defiant to the last, her beautiful face a mask of contemptuous rage, her eyes spitting venom at Eleanor, at the jury, at a world that had dared to dismantle her meticulously crafted empire of crime. The verdicts, when they came, were unequivocal. The judge, his face grim, addressed Victor first. Victor Allen Beaumont, for your complicity in heinous crimes that led to the death of your wife. Elodie Beaumont, for the unconscionable endangerment and emotional destruction of your own daughter. Grace Beaumont, and for your significant role in a vast criminal enterprise. This court sentences you to 30 years to life in state prison, with eligibility for parole only after serving a minimum of 25 years. Victor collapsed into his chair, a low moan escaping his lips. The judge then turned to Isabelle Marie Dubois, as the architect of this devastating conspiracy, for your direct involvement in multiple felonies, including murder, fraud, and kidnapping, and for your absolute lack of remorse. Your sentence to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, to be served in a maximum security facility. Isabelle let out a strangled cry of fury, lunging forward before being restrained. Her final act, one of impotent rage. "It is done," Eleanor whispered to Sarah and David Evans as they left the courthouse, the weight of generations seemingly lifted from her shoulders, though replaced by a mother's enduring grief. Justice, in its own imperfect way, has been served. Now, we focus entirely on Grace. We help her build a life worthy of her mother's sacrifice and her own incredible courage. The years that followed were a quiet unfolding of healing. Grace, with Eleanor as her devoted legal guardian and the Evanses as her unwavering, loving surrogate parents, found a measure of peace on their sun-drenched farm. The sprawling, cold Beaumont mansion was sold, its contents auctioned, the proceeds, after extensive legal wrangling and restitution to victims of the Argentis fraud, placed into a trust for Grace and for a new, profoundly meaningful endeavor. Grace attended the local school, where her quiet intelligence and artistic talents blossomed. The eidetic memory that had once been a curse, forcing her to relive horrors with painful clarity, now became a gift. She could recall landscapes, faces, emotions, and translate them onto canvas with a breathtaking skill that astounded her teachers. Evelyn Reed remained a gentle, guiding presence in her life, helping her navigate the lingering shadows of trauma, teaching her coping mechanisms, and celebrating every small victory. Cooper, his distinctive limp a constant reminder of his bravery, was her ever-present companion. He became an unofficial therapy dog at the local children's library, his calm demeanor and intuitive understanding of sadness offering silent comfort to any child who needed a furry friend. "Grandma," Grace said one sunlit afternoon. She was 16 now, her voice a soft, melodious alto, as she sat sketching Cooper by the creek, Eleanor watching her with a tender smile. "I was thinking about Mama Elodie's studio at Blackwood. It was so sad and empty, but she loved it there. Didn't she?" This conversation, and many like it, planted a seed. Eleanor, With the passionate support of Grace, the Evanses and Evelyn decided to transform the old Blackwood Sanatorium estate, the site of so much darkness, into something beautiful. The main, crumbling building was carefully dismantled, its stones repurposed. In its place rose the Elodie and Cooper Sanctuary, a vibrant, welcoming center dedicated to fostering healing and creativity in children who had suffered trauma, particularly those affected by crime or complex family situations. It offered art therapy, music therapy, storytelling workshops, and, at its heart, an expansive animal-assisted therapy program. There were sunlit studios, quiet reading nooks, sprawling gardens, and a special Cooper's Corner where children could simply sit with the gentle, aging Rottweiler, finding solace in his quiet presence. Grace, as she grew into a thoughtful, compassionate young woman, became deeply involved in the sanctuary's work, her own experiences lending her a unique empathy. She would often lead art workshops, helping children express feelings too painful for words. Her own canvases now filled with light, hope, and the enduring image of a brave dog standing guard over a resilient flower. In his sterile prison cell, Victor Beaumont underwent his own slow, torturous metamorphosis. Stripped of power, wealth, and Isabel's toxic influence, he was forced to confront the barren landscape of his soul. He read Elodie's journal until its pages were soft and worn, her words a constant, agonizing reminder of the love he had betrayed, the goodness he had snuffed out. He devoured books on grief, atonement, and the complex dynamics of trauma, trying to understand the devastation he had wrought. He began to write letters to Grace, sent through Eleanor, who read them first, her heart aching with a mixture of pity and a fragile, hesitant hope. "My dearest Grace," one early letter read, the handwriting cramped and uncertain. "There are no words in any language that can adequately express the depth of my remorse. I live each day with the ghost of your mother and the face of your childhood terror. I do not write this seeking forgiveness. I know I am beyond that. I write only because I need you to know, however belatedly, that the man who was your father failed you utterly. If I could undo a single moment, it would be the moment I allowed fear and greed to eclipse my love for you." Years passed. Grace, now in her early 20s, a successful artist whose work was gaining national recognition for its emotional honesty, read his letters. Initially, they were painful, reopening old wounds, but with Evelyn's continued support, she began to see in them not just the confessions of a criminal, but the struggles of a broken human being. Her replies, when they finally came, were cautious, infrequent, and carefully worded. "Father Victor," she wrote, the formal address a deliberate choice. "Thank you for your letter. I am doing well. Cooper still snores like a freight train, especially after a long day at the sanctuary. The children there, they remind me that even after the worst storms, flowers can still grow." When Victor was finally released on parole, a man hollowed by years of incarceration and self-reflection, he made no attempt to re-enter the world of finance or society. He found a quiet, anonymous job at a remote animal shelter in another state, finding a strange solace in caring for creatures as broken and in need of kindness as he felt himself to be. The meeting, orchestrated by Eleanor with Grace's hesitant consent, took place nearly 5 years after Victor's release. Grace was now a confident, serene young woman. She chose the location, the gardens of the Elodie and Cooper Sanctuary. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Cooper, his muzzle white, his movement slow but still filled with a quiet dignity, lay at her side. Victor approached, his worn clothes a stark contrast to the tailored suits of his past. His hands trembling, he looked at Grace, truly looked at her, and saw not just his daughter, but a reflection of Elodie's strength, Eleanor's resilience, and a spirit that he, in his monstrous selfishness, had tried and failed to extinguish. "Grace," he said, his voice raspy, "you are. You're even more beautiful than in the photographs Eleanor sends. Thank you for this. I don't deserve it." Grace met his gaze, her own clear and steady. "I've learned a great deal, Father Victor," she said softly, "about the scars we carry and the strength it takes to heal them. I've learned that forgiveness isn't always about forgetting or excusing. Sometimes it's about choosing to let go of the bitterness for one's own peace." She paused, then added, "I cannot erase what happened. It is woven into the fabric of my life, but I will not let it be the only thread. I truly hope you find some measure of peace in what remains of your life." She didn't offer an embrace, didn't call him daddy. The chasm was too wide, the betrayals too deep for such easy resolutions. But there was no hatred in her eyes, only a profound, weary sadness, and perhaps the faintest glimmer of a new, fragile understanding. Cooper, sensing the complex currents of emotion, raised his great head and let out a soft, rumbling sigh, nudging his muzzle into Grace's hand before looking at Victor, not with animosity, but with a calm, knowing gaze. He, too, seemed to understand that this was not an ending, but another quiet, uncertain step on a long, arduous journey toward healing. Grace smiled, a genuine, gentle smile that reached her eyes. "The sanctuary is helping so many children. Father Victor, Mama Elodie, she would be proud. And Cooper," she stroked the old dog's head, "he's the best teacher of all." As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the peaceful gardens, Grace knew her own storm had truly passed. The seeds of revival, sown in love and watered by courage, had flourished, creating a legacy of hope that would touch countless lives, a testament to the enduring power of light to overcome even the most profound darkness. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved me, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of Grace and Cooper's journey stayed with you the most? What would you have done in her place? Let's talk about it. Drop your feelings, theories, or even just a word of support in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another powerful story like this one. Thank you for watching. And as always, here's a small gift from me to you, waiting in tomorrow's story. A luxury SUV pulls off a secluded road at midnight. The man driving it is impeccably dressed, his every move precise, cold, efficient, rehearsed. His name is Victor Beaumont, a wealthy businessman with a pristine public image and a darkness no one dares confront. Clutched in his hand, a leather briefcase, semi-open, still, breathing, he walks deep into the forest, looks around. No witnesses, no cameras. Then he drops the briefcase and walks away. No remorse, no hesitation. As the engine fades into the night, silence settles over the woods. But something has seen it all. From the nearby tree line, a Rottweiler named Cooper Massive, alert and eerily intelligent, emerges. He was just wandering near the edge of the forest, drawn by something he can't explain. Cooper sniffs the air, ears twitching. The wind tells him everything: fear, confusion, and the scent of something precious. He follows it. The briefcase moves, whimpers. A tiny hand pokes out. Inside is Grace, a 5-year-old girl, deaf, fragile, trembling from cold, and alive. Cooper doesn't bark. He doesn't panic. He acts. He nudges the briefcase open gently, then uses his weight to drag her out, then slowly, inch by inch, pulls her toward the light, to safety, to a chance. What unfolds next is a story that defies logic. Grace is brought to Cecilia, a retired veterinary nurse living in quiet solitude in an old farmhouse at the forest's edge. She hasn't let anyone into her life for years, but when she sees that girl muddy, bruised, and holding tightly to the dog who saved her something in her breaks. Or maybe something finally begins to heal. Together, they piece together the puzzle, but every answer leads to something darker. Why would a father abandon his child this way? Why is there no missing person report? Why is Victor's home filled with cameras and hidden rooms? And most chilling of all, why is there live stream footage of Grace being kept in that basement? Yes, it exists. A video file covertly recorded by one of the house's internal systems and found by pure chance shows something monstrous. Grace was never just neglected. She was documented, streamed, abused for profit. Behind the closed doors of a mansion, a child lived a silent horror, and no one knew because she couldn't cry for help. But someone did hear her. Cooper. What began as an act of instinct becomes something greater. A war for truth. As Cecilia digs deeper, she finds herself confronting not just Victor's crimes, but the corrupt network protecting him. Lawyers, judges, media, they all owe Victor something, and they'll do anything to make Grace disappear for good. But there's something they didn't plan for. A girl with nothing left to lose. A woman who's been silent for too long. And a dog who would rather die than let Grace be hurt again. What comes next is part investigation, part survival, and part reckoning. As the net closes around them, Cooper leads a desperate escape, a chase through the night that forces every character to confront the truth about who they are, what they've done, and what they're willing to sacrifice for redemption. Because sometimes, justice doesn't wear a badge. Sometimes, it has 4 legs, scars on its muzzle, and eyes that have seen too much. This is not a feel-good story. It's not about polished heroes or happy endings handed out like candy. It's about earned peace, about fighting back, and about how the most powerful kind of love doesn't always come from humans. It starts in a forest, with a suitcase, and it ends with a truth the world can't ignore.